What animated movie did I watch? Oh, it was Justice League versus Teen Titans. Just see what it was about. So it wasn't good, but there was one part, Superman and Wonder Woman are like in a relationship, and they're talking on the phone, like setting up plans for later, and she's like, "Oh, by the way, I got a new pair of glasses. You might not recognize me."
That's pretty good.
That was pretty good.
Hi, welcome to Comic Talk. I'm Joshua.
And I is the mathematical denotation of an imaginary number.
This is our movie tie-in episode for the Suicide Squad.
Going to talk about these too?
We're going to talk about these. These are Suicide Squad comics.
So we have Volume 1 of the original John Ostrander run, which is named Trial by Fire. And then we have Volume 4 of the New 52, which is Discipline and Punish. Not Punishment, just Punish.
Cool. Let's do a title thingy. All right, and we're back. And remember, this episode is brought to you by Sidekick. Every hero needs a sidekick.
Well, why are you going to take my thing?
Well, I have to do some too.
Okay.
I think we're contractually obligated that I have to do so many of them.
Oh shit, we're going to get sued.
I know.
F.
It's all right. We've got like 8 more of these before our contract's over, so I can get mine in. And I think I only have to do 4, so
okay,
we're good.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, today we're going to talk about Suicide Squad. The movie's coming out in like a few months, so this will give you time to read a few things if you're one of those people that are saying, "What should I read before I watch the movie?" Right? I'm already seeing those threads on like the interwebs, right? People asking, "What should I read?"
Yeah.
So
Well, okay, so realistically, with the way the DC is working right now, the way that they want everything to fucking tie into everything, like if you want something that's going to be probably closest to the movie that's coming out, it's going to be the Suicide Squad that's out right now.
Suicide Squad?
Right. I think they're going to great lengths to make that connection.
Especially like character-wise, I think. Yeah.
That being said, I don't think that they're the best to read.
They're not really that good.
No, both of these are like way the fuck better.
Right.
So if you like reading good shit, let's do this.
Yeah, and I also think that both of these hit on aspects of the Suicide Squad in a way that you don't get with the new run. You maybe do, but it's kind of chintzy. These really, I think both of these boil down the idea of Suicide Squad to its fundamentals in a way. So I think that's why these are a good choice, and why we chose Volume 1 of the original Suicide Squad run, because this really was the beginning. This set up Suicide Squad. Really, what's his name? Ostrander, right? It was just his idea. He wanted to grab all these characters nobody was using, and like, because they're expendable, right? So there's just tons of expendable characters, so let's use them and expend them.
Right.
And so we really, in this original, we get the setup, and we get the basic idea. The thing is, though, most of those characters are not the same characters that we'll see in the movie.
We do have Deadshot, Captain Boomerang. I think that's it.
Right, which are, in my opinion, the two founding members of Suicide Squad. They're kind of the through line of most Suicide Squad stories.
I really liked Rick Flag in this one, but we can get to that later.
I did as well. And now the newer one, this is from the New 52. This was just a couple years back.
Yeah.
They've actually kind of rebooted Suicide Squad again since this, and it's the new Suicide Squad. But this was the original run of Suicide Squad stuff after the rebooted universe. And this volume, specifically Volume 4, was mostly written by a guy named Ailes Cott, who is kind of a gritty indie comic writer. So he was a good fit for this, and he really, although there's story before this, and you're clearly coming in a Volume 4, you don't need Volume 1 through 3 at all.
Absolutely not. You'll be fine just coming into this.
And this does some fun stuff with the idea of just jumping in and going, that I think the movie is probably going to do some of this same kind of thing here. And this has more of the characters you'll see from the film, especially notably Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn and Deadshot are both very big characters in this.
Yes,
so
yes, they are.
That's pretty cool for people that are wanting to see those characters in action.
Yeah, this trade specifically I like because they had that Villains Month thing back in the day, and so we got single issues for Deadshot and Harley Quinn in the back of this. And this Harley Quinn solo comic is like one of the only things solely about her that I feel is even like remotely worth reading.
Agreed.
So,
yeah. Definitely. Okay, so we are going to back up a step, and I think we'll talk about the old original Ostrander run first.
Can you do that first?
You think so?
Sure.
All right, let's do that. So that's what it looks like. It's called Trial by Fire. You can get it on like Amazon or a billion other places for like $10-15.
Sure.
So first of all, let's just talk about general impressions and feel of this comic. How would you describe it to a viewer who hasn't read it?
Fairly in-depth character study.
Yeah, that's definitely one good aspect of it. I think the other side of that, though, is that it's very 1980s. It's very much a product in its time in that it has a lot of comic booky nature to it. If you're looking for like classic comic book but done with some craft and grit to it and social commentary.
Yeah, there's a lot of social commentary in this. It's awesome. Like Reagan appears in this trade.
Right, but
and
it's
they
all,
criticize him. It's great.
Right, but it's all done with a lot of like expositionary dialogue where they find reasons to have people spend a page or two talking about the story so far. Right, there's a lot of There's a lot of things where you read through and you can tell it's the first 2 pages of the next comic because it's kind of like last time on, right?
But the flip side to that is, back in the day, man, comics were just bigger. Like more shit happened.
Yeah, and wordy. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of writing happening.
Yeah, and we didn't have things like mycomicshop.com or like any of the apps and stuff. So, I mean, if you missed an issue, like, you were just kind of fucked. Like, you had to pick up the next one and just go for that. So, I mean, this was definitely written with that environment in mind.
Yeah, it's this was pre the decompression era. The modern era is considered decompressed, right? You get very little story per issue. This is the opposite.
You get a ton.
This packs in like a film worth of stuff over a couple issues. You could make a trilogy of just this.
And it's thick. I mean, it took me like a few hours to get through this.
Right.
Which is awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
Artistically, it looks like an 80s comic.
Yeah, that's my one thing that
I don't think it's bad. It looks pretty good.
It's fine.
For being, an 80s comic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm never really impressed with the old school art, and of course, the paneling's pretty standard. But the story's so good that I didn't really care.
Yeah.
It's not something you're going to read for the art. Let's just say that.
Right. So the story itself, though, it does a lot of cool stuff, right? There's a lot of like geopolitical stuff going on. There's that whole interesting section with the lady that doesn't want to be rescued, right?
Yeah.
A lot of really, really challenging material here in terms of like a superhero narrative. It's not saving the day. It's a lot of what we have here is failure, right? We kind of repeatedly somebody drops the ball,
or they get fucked over by some bureaucrat,
or fuck each other over, right? This is not a standard superhero story by any means.
No, even so we had this one issue with what was his name, William Hell.
William Hell.
Yeah, and I thought that was going to be just super tropey, like comic book stuff. But then, like, we get this really in-depth story about like racism and like the perception of a hero and
and also the way they deal with it is not. They don't just go fight
punch him. Yeah.
They have to discredit this guy, right? Because he's a racist and he's spouting racism. And he's got the money to back it. He's like racist Batman.
Right, yeah, right? Basically.
And so you can't just beat the guy up because then
he's a martyr.
You made a martyr out of the guy. And we get that a couple times. We get a lot of stuff about martyrs in here, actually. So they have to discredit him. So it's this whole clever little story that is comic booky and fun, but
it's real shit.
Yeah, it's dealing with real issues.
Also, on this topic of martyrdom, I really loved the accidental martyr in this. Like, that was so perfect.
Yeah.
because they kind of got to this place where I was like, how the fuck are they gonna like write this? You know, because they totally like fuck this girl out of like everything they're trying to do, and then
it just consistently pulls you through the story with interesting new hooks as you read too. Like it doesn't linger, and I think that's part of like the compressed era, right? Like you really get a cram-packed narrative, you get through it, and you feel, all right, time for the next one. It does a really good job with that.
Yeah.
But it's a long read. There's a lot to read.
I also want to mention just the first issue in this, which I think actually came from
Secret Origins.
Secret
Origins number 14 specifically. Yeah.
So on that note, I would probably recommend like reading this in trade because you get like cool little extra shit like that, and you know it's going to be on the better paper, so just it'll be cheaper. The original issues of this are fucking expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, that first Secret Origins issue was like probably one of the best comics I've ever read.
Oh yeah.
It was so good.
Yeah.
You know, where they just like those little bits of dialogue that they used like repeatedly in like Martin Luther King's speech fashion to just make it like more and more powerful each time you hear it, and then like tells the story of like this whole family and then like this kid growing up and everything that he went through, and it was just great. And it's not even people that I would normally identify with. Like I don't give a shit about military brats. Like who cares? Not me. But I was so like taken by that story. Like I think after I read it, I put it down and I texted you and I was like, this is fucking like the best Suicide Squad that I've read in like a long time, and I'm only through the first issue. Right.
Yeah. And also all of the characters are really get their time in the sun, which is another really good thing. Specifically, you know, they definitely focus on, I felt like Deadshot is huge. Rick Flag gets a lot of time. Waller as well, yeah, and also the Enchantress gets quite a bit of page time. But even the smaller characters like Bronze Tiger, people who when you start the first couple issues you think are going to be background guys, they come off as they're not going to be important. But as you go further through, you see different parts of the narrative begin to focus on different characters, which ends up, you know, being an important part of Suicide Squad, and it's an important aspect of this series, and I imagine is going to be an important part of the ensemble in the film.
Sure. I mean, overall, like I'm not generally a fan of DC team books, but yeah, this is a fantastic team book. The last part of the team dynamic that I really liked about this is just the way that the individual characters' motivations sort of pull the story their way just a little bit at certain points. Like, you know, sometimes Captain Boomerang just decides to be a dick, and then like things happen because of that. Like that changes the narrative.
Right.
It's not just, you know, he says a couple little quippy things and somebody says "shut up, Harkness" and punches him in the face, and that's that.
Right.
You know, which we get in a lot of the new Suicide Squad stuff. But yeah, here it's like there's actual consequences for everything, and Rick Flag's moral standing, you know, which we don't have, because he's actually like a quote unquote good guy, you know, that's with all these like criminals,
right?
Which we don't get in like any other Suicide Squad that I've read,
right?
So when he finds out about something shady happening, like he's fucking pissed, you know, and beating down Waller's door and like, you need to write this or I'm like out of here and I'm gonna blow the whistle on this whole thing and you're gonna be fucked. And how do I know that you're not gonna do this thing to me?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he definitely is an important part of it that I think is really missing in all of the newer Suicide Squad stuff. And if Rick Flag is a character in the film, right? Like
I believe so.
Yeah, he's going to be an important part of it. So
yeah.
I'm glad they recognize that as well. So this is a good thing to read, just for nothing else, for Rick Flag, I think.
Yeah.
But Captain Boomerang is as well. I have to say, to a non-Suicide Squad reader, and especially to maybe somebody who doesn't read a lot of comics, especially Big Two comics, that may have stumbled onto our show because of what we're doing here. Captain Boomerang sounds like the kind of character that you're going to go, come on, that's stupid. He's going to suck. That's going to be a terrible character. But the thing with these sort of comics, and really one of the important things about Suicide Squad, is it takes characters like Captain Boomerang and it fleshes out their personality. It
Right.
says, yeah, he has a stupid name.
Mm-hmm. He even like has like some existential crisis about
Right.
like being a C-lister or whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You know, he has a stupid name. His power is a little silly. He has like boomerangs.
Yeah.
Right, come on.
They explode.
Right. And what
Sometimes.
what can you really do with boomerangs? And it's true, and it's true with the character in the series. A lot of what gets him by is the fact that he doesn't get involved. He's kind of a prick.
Mm-hmm.
He avoids conflict, right? Because all he has is boomerangs, right?
Right.
But that's a useful guy to have on the team. He's kind of the rogue of the team, you know, the thief or whatever, you know. Normally in a group dynamic, he's that guy that's rubbing the wrong way. That's giving you that outside man in the situation.
Constant dissenter.
Right.
Of everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And even within like the action sequences, he's usually barely involved. But that being barely involved gives him that edge, you know, when
Right.
he actually tosses a boomerang.
What the fuck was that?
Yeah, shoot, whack, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting bit, and I like that it's showcased so well here. That, you know, the goofy character, the guy that the average viewer would go like, that's stupid, actually carries the show in a lot of the issues, you know. He's
Yeah.
integral part of the team.
Ends up being your favorite. Like, I promise you'll like him.
Yeah.
I promise.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fucking good. Just
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. So this one, this is from the New 52, which was a reboot that happened in 2011. This is volume 4, so it's like 18 through 24 or something like that, 16 through 24.
Let me see. 20 to 23, and then 2 of the Villains Month one-shots.
Gotcha. So, you know, somewhere a year and a half, 2 years after that into the storyline. And I think what makes this one interesting is, A, it's written by Ailes Cott, who's really good at writing this kind of thing. He's kind of...
Yeah, I think so too, which is a bummer because this is the only... Like,
Only
they gave
one
him
he did.
4 issues of Suicide Squad.
Right. So not only just that in general, but I think that this really encapsulates the idea of a modern Suicide Squad, kind of the push and pull of the team and how they're just barely held together kind of thing. I think is like the best modern take I've seen. They also have, I think, a camaraderie with each other by now that they don't have in the earlier volumes. That I think we're likely to see in the film. I think in the movie they're probably going to be quick friends, right?
Sure.
It's going to be begrudgingly friendly with one another to overcome the problem. We all know the formula. So we get to see that in its completed form, right? We don't have to sludge through multiple volumes of them getting to know each other and gain each other's trust.
Right. The other thing I liked about this is, so because we have all villains, you know, there's not a good guy. And then one of the people put, quote unquote, in charge to some degree is James Gordon Jr., who's like a total psychopath. Like, the first part of this trade is just them, like, fucking with him.
Yeah.
Like, just trying to just fuck with them and just see what they do, you know? And that gives you, like, a really, really in-depth and unique character study that you couldn't get with, like, Batman or something like that,
Right.
you know? I mean...
Right. And it does reveal a bit of what it's like for them, right? Because they're not just a team of heroes going out, and they're not just hanging out and then go on a mission, right? Like, they're put through hell, and Waller will take somebody like James Gordon Jr., which, by the way, is, yes, you recognize the name, it is James Gordon, you know, Batman commissioner guy. It's his son, and he's a sociopath, and Batman and company have tried to kill him. They took one of his eyes before this ever happens. But they put him in, like, basically in charge and let him play with them to see what happens, you know. So he's torturing the shit out of them, basically, like psychologically torturing them in the middle of missions or in between, right? So they go out and they have to do something, and they come back and they just get fucking psychologically tortured while they're there, and then have to go out and do something else. This also does a lot of fun stuff with time, right? We get now and then and 2 weeks ago and a month later and before and after. Like, it jumps around a lot, but never in a way that's too confusing.
Yeah, which the last Ailes Cott thing we read, that Wolf thing, I think we had that complaint about it, was that it was real jumpy and we didn't really understand why, and it kind of made it confusing. Such is not really the case with this.
Right.
Like, I mean, it does jump around and stuff, and at points, I felt a little bit confused about like the actual linearity of like some of the stuff, but
it
not
kind of
very
doesn't
long,
matter.
you know. Well, that too.
You know, is part of it. You know, it's intentional usually, and it only lasts a few pages. You'll get like now before you get the thing that led to now,
Right.
and they'll talk about the then before you see then.
Before you see them, yeah.
So you're like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like, you know,
And
they're
then
like,
they'll show
oh,
you.
we should have killed her, and you're like, what? When? And then like a couple pages later, it's like then, and
Yeah.
it goes back and shows what they're talking about when they should have killed her, right?
Right.
So it's fun in that way. I think it plays around with your expectations in a way that a lot of good film does. I think in the way it'll give you pieces of things and then jump, you know, around.
It also makes it like a super like quick read. I mean, like you pick up this thing and you just like burn through it,
Yeah.
you know, and not because, you know, necessarily like the lack of dialogue or narration or anything like that. Like it's, you know, it's pretty dense, you know, I mean, not as dense as like the old one, but you know, there's, it's not nearly as fast as the new one. But yeah, just the pacing of it, like you just want to keep reading and reading and reading and reading because you have to know what happens next.
Yeah.
So, yes, very good pacing.
Artistically, it's really fun. It's very modern and fresh, and it's not hard to follow. They do a good job artistically to make it pretty digestible by a new reader, I think. You know, some things we read and that we like might not necessarily be so great for somebody trying to jump in for the first time, but this one really works hard to make it very easy to read without having much foreknowledge of how to read a comic book.
Right, yeah. The paneling is like just north of old school standard.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's not confusing in any way, but it's not like, you know, 468 whatever either.
Right, exactly. So how about for the end of this, let's just do a little bit of compare contrast between the two, maybe.
Sounds great, yeah.
That's something we kind of like to do usually on these. So let's start with maybe who we think these would be for, you think?
Okay.
That'd be a good way to start.
Okay.
So I would say the original one, the older one, is kind of a mixed bag. It's for, I would say, people who are pretty comfortable with comic books and people who are specifically looking for a comic book, if that makes sense.
See, I kind of have the opposite impression. Like, the new one I would give to somebody like in their late teens, early 20s, something like that. Really, I mean, 14 up, I would probably say. Whereas the original, I would give to somebody like a little bit older who's read like some Hemingway and stuff like that.
I actually agree. So I don't think we're that far off. I think I'm maybe not explaining super well. By looking for a comic book, I think that it's more, it looks like what you would expect a comic book to look like and feel like the classic idea of a comic book.
But I don't think it reads like a lot of people expect a comic book to read.
That's true.
What I was getting at. Because it's not, this has more just, you know, people like punching each other and taking out huge, you know, freak villains and stuff like that. So,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I would agree. The newer
the fucking
one,
Taliban is
right.
like a villain in the original. Right. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The new one definitely, and Russia.
Yeah.
Is the other one, like the Kremlin is like the other villain. It's very political. I would agree that this one skews a little younger. It skews grittier, but like in a visceral sense. It's more of a visceral read. But it's also less sophisticated, I think.
Yeah, less nuanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have an hour to read and you want to just pick up something to get a general idea what Suicide Squad feels like, probably the newer one, you know. But if you want something a little deeper, but also, again, you have to be ready to read what looks like a classic comic book. That's the problem with it, is what I'm getting at. It's probably off-putting to a whole demographic of people.
Yeah, I mean, as deep as the writing is, like if you look at it, like you're gonna feel like you're reading a comic book.
Right, and there's a lot of comic book tropes involved that you have to be comfortable with. Of, just panels that just show a guy's face and it explains the guy, over his head in a whole panel. Whereas this one, it does the same thing, but it's the panel of the character. It says their name, and then it's like 2-word little quip. Crazy.
Yeah.
Right? That's the explanation of a character. Or suicidal, smart, whereas that one would be like a panel with like a paragraph case study of the person.
Yeah. Good Colonel Rick Flag was mere 8 years old. His father was taken from him.
Right. And then maybe a couple more panels of like what happened. Lastly, I almost forgot. We should probably talk about those two.
The two in the back?
Yeah, because there's a Harley Quinn
and a Deadshot.
And a Deadshot, which are both super important for the film. And these are like origin story in a way for both of the characters.
Yeah, it gives a lot of origin and just I'd say just a good like character study individually of each of them. Yeah,
most certainly. But the character study comes from the origin, and it's nice because it's an origin told well into the character's existence. Right? A lot of origin stories, I usually try to steer readers away from origins. Most people come in, they say, "Oh, I want to read like how Batman started. I want to read his origin." Well, that's garbage. Like most of the origins are bad because the character doesn't exist until it's fully formed later on. It usually
not to mention they came out like for fucking ever ago. Like cool, you like Wolverine, but I guarantee you're not gonna like Hulk 181 because it's a fucking trash comic. Like it came out in like the 60s or 70s. It sucks.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I try to push people away from them, but this is one where the origin is written de post facto, right?
Yeah.
We already have the character fully formed, and then let's fill in a backstory that makes sense with the real character. So it makes it really great, and there's some really cool moments in here that I won't spoil.
Definitely.
So I think this one I would almost say is worth buying and reading just for those two pieces.
Yeah, they're great.
Alone. Yeah.
Which again, like, you can't get me to stop talking shit on Harley Quinn and how like every comic with her is absolute garbage. But this like Villains Month one shot where they give her like a whole issue and talk about like her origin and just like the way her mind works and what caused her to make that jump from the psychiatrist to the psycho. It's fucking great.
It is really great.
Yeah.
And it's so it's like it feels out of character from the Harley Quinn we have now.
Yeah.
Right? Because
she has like thoughts and motivations. And,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And it paints her as a highly intelligent person who, like the Joker in a way, has decided to just say like, fuck all that. I don't want to be inside of a box, right? I'm just gonna do whatever the fuck I want and cause mayhem just like almost to prove that it doesn't matter, right? It's almost like a nihilistic exuberance. It's quite interesting, actually. It's very interesting.
I was done living a regimented life, grades, work, money, banks. I was going to start living, treating life like one big buffet and all you can eat food fight.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's all these other moments though where she's talking about how sometimes the old Harleen comes through and that part of her is useful. Which I really liked because usually that's completely erased from most Harley Quinn portrayals. But she's really useful for like planning and long-term thinking and embezzling, like my using my intellect and reasoning skills is still useful. I just choose not to most of the time on purpose as like
turn it off because
as like a personal choice.
Right, because that version of me has a conscience.
Right. And it's a lot more interesting to just be like this.
Yeah.
You know? So, and then the Deadshot one shot is just straight brutal most of the way through. It's just sad and poignant, and you understand why he's a suicidal badass, really,
It's just 20 pages of people getting shot.
Yeah. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
So, I think that pretty much wraps it up. That's definitely our recommendations for what you should read. And frankly, aside from maybe after you read Volume 4, reading Volume 5 as a follow-up, and after you read Volume 1 of the old school one, reading the next volume as a follow-up to that, I'm not so sure I'm comfortable really recommending any other Suicide Squad stuff, especially not the new
Suicide Squad. Yeah, we got a good annual out of it, but the month-to-month $2.99, it leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah, and the annual only works if you read the issues leading up to it as well.
That's true.
So it's really most Suicide Squad has been mediocre at best over the last 15 years, to be honest. All right, well, we will be back next Monday when we talk about more comic books, and we will be back on Thursday when we talk about more comic books that just came out. So that's what we do. That's our thing. Subscribe, like.
Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr.
Yeah. Bye now.